Hello, guys. So, I just finished topping off my foreshadowing theories. I did have to write everything down this time because there's a lot. I don't know how long this video is going to run, so I'll probably have to post it in a few parts, like I did with the last one. So, it might be a little difficult to follow my train of thought because I delve really, really deep into this one. But try as hard as you can to follow along, and I will try to be as clear and concise and, as clear as I can with everything that I have to say. So this is my foreshadowing video. As I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about all of the foreshadowing within the Sherlock series that has led up to the Sherlock and Molly I love you scene, and why that had to be the peak of all the foreshadowing between them. So, let's begin. I have some of my thoughts here written down, or most of my thoughts here written down. So I'm going to start with the Abominable Bride. The reason I'm going to start with that is because this is when it happens in Sherlock's mind. So this is when everything festers into Sherlock going into his mind, seeing Molly as the head of the women suffragettes, seeing Molly play a male to get ahead in her job, seeing Molly as his sort of administrator within his mind, seeing her as his boss, seeing her as the harsh one to him instead of the other way around that we used to see in real life in the series, how he used to be the one that was harsh to her. And we see everything come to a head in basically the end of The Abominable Bride, with the women suffragettes when they find out that they were the brides that were haunting all the men for revenge. It turned out it was all the men who have mistreated women in various different ways we don't even really see, but it's the idea that they killed the men that had been abusive to women in The Abominable Bride. So I'm going to start with a quote from that scene that Sherlock says himself in his mind, which is, he's looking at Molly, and she's looking at him, and she's in her, female clothing at this point. And he looks directly at her and he says, "The women we have ignored and disparaged." And this is so important. This line is the line that begins Sherlock's softness to Molly, and Sherlock's kindness to Molly, and Sherlock being more in tune to her feelings and in tune to how important she is to him, how much she helps him, how much of a fixture she is in his life. So what we must remember is that it happened in Sherlock's mind. He's high. He's on the plane after, this takes place after he shot Magnuson, and he goes into his mind palace. So this happens in his mind. This is how he sees Molly in his mind, as a strong, willful, take no bullshit type of woman that will do anything to get ahead in her job, that will tell him off for being a prick, as he notices she's begun to do in his real life. So he admits to ignoring and disparaging Molly, and he admits that this behavior is not acceptable and needs correcting in his mind. And as I said, from then on, he's a lot softer, kinder, and more human with her, more friendly with her, more of a friend to her. As we know, he thinks of her as a friend, but he becomes more of a friend to her as much as she has been a friend to him. We see that in season 4 as well. Even though we don't have enough, in my opinion, we don't have enough Molly in season 4. We see this in season 4. He realizes just how important she is to him, and that continuing to be the way that he was, which was, harsh to her, which was kind of ignoring her role, which was kind of telling her off or just brushing her off, he could lose her as that fixture in his life. And he's not going to let that happen. In fact, this scene in The Abominable Bride shows the feelings that he has for her, that he's bringing up to us, the audience, within his mind palace. And this is why the season 4 I Love You scene isn't too shocking for me. Because, as Mycroft points out, everything here, it's all about him. Which leads me into Mycroft being wrong with his next quote, which was, oh, it's for somebody who loves Sherlock. Well, no. If it's all about Sherlock, it's not about the people who love Sherlock, because as the audience, we already know that all of his friends love him. We already know that all of his friends care about him. We already know that Molly loves him, obviously, as we've seen. We already know that they're friends, because even in the I Love You scene, Sherlock admits that, no, you're not an experiment, we're friends, So it's not about Molly saying I love you to him. It's not about somebody who loves Sherlock. In fact, it's about somebody that Sherlock loves. Molly, obviously. It's about Sherlock's feelings for Molly that he wouldn't admit. It's about him admitting his feelings for her. And they set this foreshadowing, I think, the most in The Abominable Bride. Which is amazing. I think that starts the ball rolling, even though there's a bunch of examples before that, which I'll get into. That is really the point that sets the ball rolling, specifically because it's in Sherlock's mind, specifically because it's how he's thinking of her at this point, and how he's lifting her up in his own head, basically telling his heart that she means a lot more to him than he has been open about in front of us, the audience. And I want to go into what I said about Mycroft being wrong about the plaque, and how he said that he thought it was for someone that loves Sherlock. And I put on my Tumblr post that some of you might have read. I'm kind of reading off of that at the moment. But there was an Instagram follower of mine. I'm not going to say her name on this video because I don't know if she wants to be mentioned, but she's on my Tumblr post, and she commented, well, they've been saying that Mycroft is smarter than Sherlock, that he's more clever than Sherlock, which I think just kind of begs the question, how could he be wrong? How could it, not be about someone who loves Sherlock? How could it be the other way around? Possibly. So I said, in response to that, Mycroft is supposed to be smarter, supposed to be more clever. And I said, yeah, in a way he is, Mycroft was the one who said everything about Eurus's game, how it's about Sherlock and how it is about Sherlock. But this emotional context is for Sherlock, about Sherlock. It's not for Molly, it's not about Molly. Everything there is centered around Sherlock, just like Mycroft said. Molly wanted to hear Sherlock say it because she wasn't going to let him, walk all over her, which is again why Sherlock had a hard time with it, because in his mind, in The Abominable Bride, he wasn't going to do that anymore. He wasn't going to walk all over her. He wasn't going to brush her off. Um, um, I think Molly knows that he has some sort of feelings, whether it's friendly, whether you believe my last video about whether they had a night together. There's something there. Whether you believe they're romantic or not, there is still something. There's something between them. And we see over and over how Molly has bitten back when he's been cruel. So it's true to form that she wouldn't give him her heart so easily if his I love you wasn't at least partly genuine. Of course she'd make him say it first. And Eurus knows this. Eurus knows this, and that's going to be later on in this video how I break down Eurus's thought process and how that relates to Molly. But Mycroft also says in the beginning of the episode, which is a very, 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 very important line for me, for the foreshadowing. He says, she knew things she should never have known, as if she were beyond the human scope. This line is brilliant. This line sets the scene for the I love you scene. This line proves that what Eurus is doing has double meaning. She's cleverer than Mycroft even. She's a genius beyond Newton. And I'll probably say this a million times. just warning you. Genius beyond Newton. So she knows things that even Mycroft doesn't know. She knows things that even Sherlock doesn't know. I mean, she knows things, obviously, that John doesn't know. And I'm going to break down her reasoning later, which I hope you love as much as I do. Because I love digging deep like this. But to get into the foreshadowing from before The Abominable Bride, to get into the foreshadowing in the beginning of the final problem about how Mycroft is smart and he sometimes gets it wrong. We see this. He gets it wrong when he even allows Eurus any time with Moriarty unsupervised. We see him get things wrong, how he is cruel to his parents by telling them their daughter is dead when she's not dead. That was horrible. So he got it wrong in that sense as well. Mycroft says she's very clever, and we get the kind of piggybacking quote as to how Mycroft gets it wrong when Sherlock says, "Well, I'm beginning to think you're not." And as I said, while Mycroft does get it right by saying everything there is centered around Sherlock, it's all about you, everything here, he does get it wrong when he says it's for someone who loves Sherlock about the coffin plaque, because it clearly isn't. It's the wrong way around. Just like Eurus, you got it the wrong way last time. It's for someone Sherlock loves. It's for Molly that Sherlock loves. But we already know that Mycroft would get this wrong. How, you ask? Because if you remember back to the scene in The Lying Detective, which is very telling, which is foreshadowing as well, Mrs. Hudson has a scene there where she says to both Mycroft and John, funny how they're the two people that are in this room for the I love you scene, she says, "Oh, he's not about thinking, not Sherlock. He's more emotional." And Mycroft is stunned. John is even a bit taken aback by that, but Mycroft is stunned. He doesn't see Sherlock as the emotional person that he is. He doesn't see Sherlock as emotional since he was a kid, since Redbeard. He says this in the beginning of the final problem as well, with his quote, "He was, in the early days, an emotional child." Mycroft never even considers that it's for someone Sherlock loves, because he doesn't see him as that emotional person anymore, as that emotional child. Even though we see as the audience how his character development season by season has made him softer and kinder and more human, leading up to this scene. So yes, Mycroft gets it wrong. He gets it the wrong way when he says the plaque is for someone who loves Sherlock, because it's not. It's for someone Sherlock loves. And that was foreshadowed again by Mrs. Hudson's quote. How he's not about thinking, he's about emotion. And how Mycroft was just completely and utterly shocked by that. He never even considered that. So of course he would get that wrong. Going down to my next point, Sherlock does love Molly. I do think his fear about his love for her lies in the fact that people he's closest to are always threatened or hurt, or, as we see with Mary, killed. And by keeping Molly at arm's length the way he has, she has avoided being connected to him in a way that makes her susceptible to Sherlock's villains, such as Moriarty, or so Sherlock thought, of course. And we see this with his sweet little line in The Empty Hearse. You know, it wasn't just him being emotional. It was a foreshadowing line when he says, Moriarty slipped up, he made a mistake, because the one person he thought didn't matter at all to me was the one person who mattered the most. And Sherlock says this to Molly, telling her that he, basically, by keeping her at arm's length, by not being emotional with her, by being, or at least acting, by acting cold around her, he keeps her safe from villains like Moriarty. Because Sherlock at this point believes that Moriarty skipped over her, believes that Moriarty saw her as just a pawn in Sherlock's life. Because as we see with the Jim from IT thing, how Moriarty sees Sherlock basically tear down Molly's relationship with him. And him being harsh to her, although he's sorry about that at this point in season 3 because he's kinder, he's softer, he's more human, he's grateful for that because he believes that Moriarty looked over her in a sort of, oh, she doesn't really matter to him kind of way. Which is why he says this. Which is why he says the one person he thought didn't matter at all to me was the one person who mattered the most. So this is why he keeps her at arm's length, to keep her safe, regardless of his feelings for her. As we know, as part of the audience, it turns out that Moriarty didn't slip up. He didn't make a mistake. He did see that she was important. And he goes to Eurus with that as part of this game, as part of creating the I love you scene. And Eurus gets the final proof that, in fact, she's the most important to Sherlock out of all of his friends, out of all of his Baker Street squad, as I say. Hence the I love yous. Also, hence, and here's the interesting part, which a lot of people skip over, Moriarty's I owe you. I owe you a fall, Sherlock. And it's not the fall that kills you, it's the landing. This is another brilliant foreshadowing leading up to the I love you scene, which is why it had to come to a peak at the I love you scene. Moriarty always says his advantage over Sherlock is having no remorse, no emotion. We see this come back to him when in his last vow, when Sherlock's in his mind palace dying from the gunshot wound, and he comes across the demented Moriarty that's locked up and in a padded room. And Moriarty says, pain, heartbreak, loss, it's all good, you know, and he's teasing Sherlock about his heart, and about how this encompasses their whole conversations that they've had in the short time that they had known each other when Moriarty was alive. This comes back to the pool when he says, I'll burn the heart out of you. You know, because at this point, Moriarty knows about him and Eurus's game. Sherlock doesn't. as we know, because he doesn't even know about Eurus yet. He doesn't know about Redbeard yet. But Moriarty knows about this game, and Moriarty says, basically knowing that Sherlock doesn't know, he says, I will burn the heart out of you. He already knows that Molly is Sherlock's heart, regardless of Sherlock believing that Moriarty thinks the opposite. I'll burn the heart out of you. His heart being Molly. And Sherlock says, I've been reliably informed that I don't have one. And Moriarty teases him more and says, oh, but we both know that's not quite true. And I love this. I love this foreshadowing to the I love you scene. Because we can go back and we can see it in a different light, and we can see it as, oh shit, like Moriarty knew that he loves Molly. We know that he teases him about John to basically sway him away from believing that Moriarty knows about Molly. And it's all brilliant, and Moffat and Gaddis are brilliant, and I love their literary genius. But anyways, back to his last vow when he says pain, heartbreak, loss, it's all good. Sherlock then screams, why do you never feel pain? And we have to look at that quote as, well, why did he never feel pain? What is the opposite of pain that Sherlock could be talking about? Well, the opposite of pain and heartbreak here would be love, which we also know on screen. Moriarty never felt love for another human being. He never felt remorse for another human being. He never felt any sort of connection to another human being, which he thinks is his biggest advantage, which is why he's so bored with life, which is why he doesn't mind dying. And Sherlock does in The Lying Detective, how he goes, I don't want to die, because Sherlock is an emotional person. As Mrs. Hudson points out, he's not about thinking, he's about emotion. So Sherlock gets all upset, and he's yelling at this demented Moriarty that never cared about any other human being in his life, that never knew the meaning of love. And he screams at him, and he says, why did you never feel pain? Which is basically saying, why did you never feel love? Like, how come, as smart as I try to be, as brilliant as I try to be, as detached as I try to be, I still feel love. I still feel remorse for the things I do wrong. I still feel regret. I still feel care for people that I'm close to. And we know that this is an emotional disparaging of himself, because again, he's in his mind palace, dying from a bullet wound. This Moriarty is not real. This Moriarty is chained up in the darkest depths of Sherlock's mind palace. This Moriarty is a symbol of Sherlock's remorse and regret, and a way for himself to beat himself up for all the things he's done wrong to the people he loves and the people he cares about, especially Molly. Also, as I'm going back, because I know my thoughts can kind of spider out like a web, like Moriarty's little spider web, because there's just so much to connect the dots to. But going back to the IOU of Fall foreshadowing, a slight tidbit that I'm going to sneak in here. If we go back and look at the scene of Moriarty and Sherlock on the roof in the Reichenbach Fall, Moriarty says, and I quote, here we go, all these quotes are foreshadowing, so pay attention. Moriarty says, your only 3 friends in the world will die. And of course, we know he lists John, Lestrade, and Mrs. Hudson. He doesn't consider Molly Sherlock's friend. Sherlock believes this to be an oversight, as we know from his quote to Molly in The Empty Hearse. But we know that it's not an oversight at this point in season 4. We know that it wasn't an oversight. We also know that Sherlock and Moriarty think on the same wavelength, albeit different sides, good and evil. How they face off, and Moriarty goes, "You're me, you're me," and how he goes, "You're me, but you're ordinary. You're on the side of the angels." They think on the same wavelength, but Sherlock's one disadvantage in Moriarty's eyes is his emotion, is his heart. That Moriarty does plan to burn the heart out of him with him and Eurus's game, as we know, as the audience in season 4. And we can go back and look at these scenes with different eyes after this I love you scene. Another foreshadowing point was in The Lying Detective, when Sherlock says, there must be something comforting about the number 3. People always give up after 3. He didn't know at the time, but Jim didn't give up after 3. And, some people will argue, well, it wasn't even 4 with Molly, it was 5 because Sherlock is supposed to kill Mycroft in the last game at Sharonford. But in my opinion, let's be real, that was just Jim's quirkiness, Jim's revenge on Mycroft for having him beaten and locked up for information in the Reichenbach Fall. I think that was just Jim being Jim. That was just Jim wanting Mycroft to die as revenge as well, because not only would that hurt Sherlock, but it would get revenge for what Mycroft did to him, locking him up and having him beat for information. But people always give up after 3. So Jim did not give up after 3. Number 4 was Molly. Number 4 was the most important. Molly was the most important. Molly was Sherlock's heart that Jim wanted to burn out of him. Sherlock was on the side of the angels. He would die for his friends. Of course he has a heart. Of course that's what makes him ordinary. That's what makes him weak, as Jim points out on the roof. He doesn't consider Molly Sherlock's friend because after spending time with both of them in a capacity, he knew that there had to be more. We have to remember that, again, Moriarty and Sherlock are on the same wavelength. They're both geniuses. They both see through people. And whereas Sherlock can't quite see through Moriarty, because Moriarty doesn't have a heart, doesn't have emotions, Jim's advantage is that he can see through Sherlock. He can see through Sherlock's heart and Sherlock's emotions because he has those qualities and Moriarty does not. And he knew that Sherlock and Molly must be more than friends. In Sherlock's heart and in Molly's heart. However concealed, Sherlock tries to hide it. However, he tries to ignore his feelings. Jim hides this knowledge that he has in his game in order to win by distracting, as I said before, by distracting Sherlock away from Molly by threatening John, his best friend. And another person he cares for, obviously. By, John with the bomb jacket, by, listing John and Lestrade and Mrs. Hudson on the roof and not Molly. These were distractions to take away from the fact that Moriarty knew that the person that held Sherlock's heart was always Molly. Because obviously he didn't want Sherlock to know that he had inside information. He didn't want Sherlock to know about his sister yet. He didn't want Sherlock to know that there was another game coming. He didn't want Sherlock to know that he had insight as to, of course, Sherlock would survive jumping off of Bart's. He's not stupid. Moriarty and Sherlock think on the same wavelength. And again, going by Sherlock being on the side of the angels and Moriarty having no heart and being on the side of the devils in this case. The way they react to this final problem as Moriarty actually teases him on the roof is appropriately different. Whereas Moriarty has no emotion, has no heart, and is bored, frankly, of life, he kills himself. Because as we know, he has inside information that being dead will cause more trouble for Sherlock than being alive. So he kills himself, and Sherlock, true to form, finds out a way to save his own life. Which we know has to do with Molly. Moriarty obviously knew it would come to that due to his inside information. Going back to that point, Jim knew about Molly's love for Sherlock, obviously, because he had dated her. He had manipulated her into a relationship. He had used his art of disguise to pretend to be a boyfriend to her to get information on Sherlock. The way he had manipulated the government with Irene to get information on Sherlock from Mycroft. I know I have a lot of points that lead back to this. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best to connect everything here for you. But yes, so Jim obviously knew Molly was in love with Sherlock, was infatuated with Sherlock, was pining after Sherlock, however you want to say it, as he had weaseled his way into her life. And that's proven by the fact that Molly is the one that introduces him to Sherlock, because she thinks he's amazing and incredible, and she wants to show him off to her so-and-so boyfriend, which was Jim, as we know. And he figures out Sherlock's love for Molly because, again, he correctly calculates that Sherlock will go to Molly to survive his jump off of Bart's. Why? Some people ask why or how. How did he know he would go to Molly to save his life, to jump off Bart's? Well, we know that he knows Sherlock isn't gonna kill himself because he's on the side of the angels, because he doesn't want to die, because he has emotions. We know that Jim knows Sherlock isn't going to jump to his death because he has another game for him planned, because he planned this entire game with Eurus and Sharonford for years from now. So Moriarty knows Sherlock's going to survive. He knows he's not going to jump off of Bart's, regardless of what he said about snipers. That was just another quirk of Jim's. Hey, if someone gets shot, that's just more fun. To him. I just think that's kind of funny, but it's because it's so Moriarty. It's so heartless. As we see, he thinks is an advantage, unlike Sherlock. But Sherlock needed Molly to help him survive, as we see him go to her. He trusted her. His heart loves her, regardless of how much he pushes the feeling away. If he didn't, again, there would be no use for the Sharonford game in Season 4, because he would have just jumped to his death from Bart's, and there would have been no need for it. As we see this in the Reichenbach fall, with the whole squash ball under the armpit, and I actually believe that was Molly's idea, obviously, because she's a forensic pathologist. Sherlock could have had that kind of information. We know that he knows random facts from his mind palace. But Sherlock goes to Molly after he had kept her at arm's length, after he had looked at her when she said, what do you need? you look sad when you think no one can see you. And he says, you can see me. And she says, I don't count. And he just looks shocked at that. And I think that was one of the first ever times that he realizes just how at arm's length he keeps her. Not only to criminals, but to Molly herself. He didn't quite understand until she says this to him, that she didn't know how much she meant to him. Which is why we get the look of shock and his reply of, well, you can see me. And she says, I don't count. And the shock just kind of continues. And then at the end of the Reichenbach fall, when he goes to her to save his life, because he needs Molly, he needs her expertise, he needs the woman he loves to kind of calm him down with this, even side by side with her expertise. And he says, pretty much knowing her answer, he says, if I wasn't everything that I think I am, if I'm not everything that you think I am, would you still want to help me? And she pays no mind to that, in a way, because it's ridiculous. Of course she loves him, of course she wants to help him. And she repeats herself and she goes, what do you need? And he says, you. This is an important scene, because this is the first time that we openly see Sherlock's love for Molly. Not only in his words, because we know Sherlock can be a good actor. We know Sherlock can be a good manipulator. We saw him manipulate her in the scene where he points out when she changed her hair in order to roll bodies out for him, which was kind of the only scene that he truly manipulated her. But this scene at the end of the Reichenbach fall proves his love for her, not only in his words, but in his actions. The way he's sort of hesitant to come closer to her, the way he's sort of unsure of himself when he looks at her, when he goes to her for help. And even the way that I noticed how his eyes were dilated. And I think that's very telling for his love for her. And another little foreshadowing tidbit from A Scandal in Belgravia, when he says, when she goes, you don't really think, when Irene says, you don't really think I was into you, do you? And he goes, no, I know you were, because your eyes were dilated and I took your pulse. So I believe, obviously, if Molly had taken his pulse, it would have been quite the pulse, because we see his eyes dilated as he looks at her, and we see him say, you, I need you. And I don't think he just meant in the sense of, I need you to help me save my life. I do think, as I said in my last video, things transpired after that entire roof fiasco, when he stays with Molly. If you want to hear more about that, you can listen to my last video, which is 2 parts, on what transpired between them after that. I'm sorry, this video is really long, and I'm only like halfway through it, but stay with me. I promise it gets better and better. I'm not the best speaker, as I mention in every video, but I'm doing my best. So going back to the I love you scene, the peak of the foreshadowing. After Molly's game, after the I love you plays out, we know that the truth is out about his love for her, and now she's in the line of fire, just like his other friends. And this hurts him the most. I'm going to say a few lines about this, and then I'm going to go into detail at the end of this video when I talk about Eurus. But this hurts him the most because of his love for her. And I don't just mean in a friendship sort of way, because we already know they're friends, but in a romantic sort of way, that he loves her. This is why he is so distraught. This is why he is so furious. Because he never wanted her to be in the line of fire. He never wanted her to be susceptible to the criminals that he faces. This is why he treated her the way that he did in the first couple seasons. This is why he tried to continue treating her that way, because after Moriarty died, he thought that Moriarty looked over her, and that was a success to him. That worked for him to keep her at arm's length, to keep her safe from these vicious criminals. But what he didn't count on is the fact that, as I said in my other video, Molly can absolutely handle herself. She broke up with Jim, she ended her crappy engagement, she has her own life outside of Sherlock, as we see when she answers the phone and says, you know, I'm not having a good day, what do you want? Get on with it. And that's what he doesn't take into account. He doesn't take into account that she's a tough woman. I mean, she's not a child. She can handle herself. Whatever the outcome of this, she can handle it. And I don't think he takes that into account. He still sees her as, oh, his soft and sensitive Molly, his sweet Molly that will help him, that will save his life, that will come to his aid, that will kind of be his own personal knight in shining armor, despite how soft and sensitive she is. He doesn't, he knows she can be tough, but he prefers her softer side, of course, because her harsher side gets him a slap when he's misbehaving. But once he realizes this, obviously we see her little montage at the end sauntering into 221B with her smile. But I'm not going to say a lot about that because that was in my last video. Circling back to my thoughts on the IOU of fall, because I know I keep branching out, I apologize. Regarding the number 3 that I mentioned and regarding the IOU, I think we need to look at this in an intellectual sort of way. So, without you having the words in front of you, I'm going to try as best as I can to describe this to you. So, IOU, the letters IOU, were in the background of a lot of Jim's scenes in the Reichenbach Fall. If you write out the words, I love you, I is the first letter of I, obviously. O is the second letter of love. And U is the third letter of you, Y-O-U. First letter, second letter, third letter. It also happens to be 3 words when we talk about the importance of the number 3, how people always stop after 3. Why stop after 3? Keeping this in mind, what would a 4th word be? What would come after, you know, I-O-U, I love you? And I believe, obviously, would be a rebuttal, or in Moriarty's mind, Molly's rebuttal, I love you too. The 4th word would be to, T-O-O, I love you too. Or if you want to go by the letters I-O-U, to the number would be the 4th symbol there. Also, the part of that IOU of fall, going back to the importance of the fall quotes and the you're on the side of the angels. Sherlock realizing he loves Molly was his fall from grace. How Moriarty says, you know, it's not actually the fall that kills you, it's the landing. He realizes that his love for Molly is no longer contained, his love for Molly is no longer a secret. It's out in the open, she's in the firing line, and that's the landing, that's what kills him, that's what makes him so distraught, that's what angers him so much to smash the coffin. His fall from grace is his fall from being flawless and calculating and perfect in his own eyes by detaching his love for her. because he always depended on that. He always depended on that to save her from the criminals he faces. He always depended on that to keep her at arm's length for a variety of reasons. So he doesn't upset her as much, which obviously doesn't help because obviously if you had a best friend and they were trying to ignore you to keep you safe, you'd be like, come on, that's bullshit. Like, I can handle myself. So in that regard, that's his fall from grace, is his love for her being completely exposed and out there from now on. Another little foreshadowing quote that I want to mention that I kind of threw in here while I was writing this was, I believe it was the Hounds of Baskervilles. I may be wrong. Feel free to correct me in the comments. But John is yelling at Sherlock about how harsh he is, about how cold he is, about how he sees his cases as a game and not in a human way. And John says, for God's sakes, these are real human lives at stake here. You know, it's not just a game. And Sherlock's quote is, you know, will caring about them help save them? And this comes full circle in the I love you scene, because before the phone call ends, when we are to assume that there are bombs in Molly's house, yes, caring about Molly did help save her. Caring about Molly and getting her to tell Sherlock, I love you, helped save her from the bombs. When she told Sherlock to say it back, he said it back. Because he cared enough about her to say it, whether he believed it to be true or not. The first time he said it was saving her from the bombs. So that is the foreshadowing from that about his character development and his humanity. Because caring about them does help save them a lot of the time, which he failed to account for when he was his colder, more calculating version of himself in season 1 and season 2. Until, of course, we find out Eurus tells him that he never actually had to save Molly because there were no bombs. Then Sherlock becomes his own hypocrite. She didn't actually need saving, and he wasn't actually her hero this time. He was trying to be one, regardless of the fact that he claimed also in the same episode, from when he said, well, caring about them helps save them, he goes, heroes don't exist, John, and if so, I wouldn't be one of them. He was still trying to be a hero to Molly in this regard, in this scene. Another quote of foreshadowing, moving on as fast as I can. Love is a chemical defect found in the losing side. I think a lot of us have seen a bunch of theories based on this quote. I know I have a lot, just on Tumblr alone. But as Moriarty planned, he basically won the showdown on the roof because he had that inside information that Sherlock did not have, because he was heartless, the way Sherlock is not. But Jim won. Eurus won. Jim won on the roof. Eurus won on the I love you scene, because love is found on the losing side, in Sherlock's opinion. And Sherlock absolutely loves Molly. And now everyone knows. It's out in the open. He can't keep her at arm's length. So he lost. This was him losing. As Eurus points out, you didn't win, you lost. Look what you did to her, look what you did to yourself, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get into that quote later. But what Jim and Eurus fail to see with that, in that regard, is that Molly isn't the mousy Molly lab rat that we saw in season 1 and season 2 anymore, but she's a powerful force to be reckoned with as well, and that she and Sherlock will make a great team. as they already do professionally. They would also make a great team romantically, because even though Molly is introverted, she can handle herself. Even though Sherlock is extroverted, he has a soft side. And this is why they're so good together, because of that contrast, because essentially they're the same person, but they are each other's opposites at the same time. Whereas Molly is introverted, and she can be powerful, regardless of how emotional she is. Whereas Sherlock is extroverted, he can be soft and kind with Molly, as we've seen in their intimate moments. And that's where that lovely contrast comes from, and where they would make an amazing team, both romantically as they do professionally. And just to point out, even though it's not very important, I enjoy how Moffat and Gaddis play on this a little bit in front of the audience when Sherlock and Molly are working together, or when Sherlock and Molly are having a scene together, where Sherlock's wearing the long, flowy dark coat, and Molly's wearing her long, flowy white coat, and the coat contrast, I call it, that I absolutely love because it's super subtle, but it makes a statement. I like that. I like the contrast of their coats, just like the contrast of their personalities, even though they're both brilliant. But essentially, Sherlock had to lose. He had to be destroyed emotionally to actually win. Because by losing, he's also winning. He has to fall from grace. That was the final problem. Him getting in the way of his own heart was his final problem. And Molly is his prize for finally putting his heart before his ego. Finally seeing emotions as, not a defect, but it can be used as a strength, the way that Molly uses her love for Sherlock as a strength and as a way to connect with him. But putting all these pieces together basically makes it impossible to ignore the fact that he's in love with Molly, in my opinion. There's just too much foreshadowing to go with it, too many branches, too many roundabout quotes, too much proof, too many coincidences. And what do we say about coincidences, folks? The world is rarely so lazy, or at least Moffat and Gaddis are rarely so lazy. That's what I think is wonderful. This is going to lead into, now that I'm done with Jim, because I am sort of done with Jim, I'm going to talk in depth about Eurus, because I know there are a lot of you, both on Instagram and Tumblr, that I've gotten DMs from, that I've gotten comments from, asking me about my insight on Eurus, about my insight on the way Eurus thinks, about my insight on her reasoning for some of the things she says and some of the things she does, which I find lovely. Because, as you all know at this point, from how many times I've seen The Final Problem, Eurus is one of my favorite characters. Not because she's deranged, not because she's a criminal, because obviously I love Sherlock, I love the heroes, but she's one of my favorite characters because she is a character with an exorbitant amount of depth, with so many different facets of herself. And there's so much to go over in regards to Eurus, but I'm going to keep it to all the things that have to do with Molly, because that's what my video is about. And I'm going to keep it to all of the foreshadowing about the I love you scene, because that's what this video is about. I know I've been talking for almost an hour. I'm sorry, I did not mean to make it this long, but I do have a lot more to say. Okay, I'm sorry. Here's the foreshadowing based on Eurus and how she personally knew about Sherlock's love for Molly, regardless of whatever info she had gotten from Moriarty. I got cut off because my aunt came home from work and she's making dinner, and she's the John to my Sherlock. She can be very irritating. But anyways, now that I had to split my video into two, I'm going to basically start this next part by talking about Eurus more in depth. I hope you enjoy this because, as I said before, Eurus is one of my favorite characters because of her depth and because of all the different facets of her personality and by how absolutely genius she is. So let's start. I'm going to try to read what I wrote word for word to kind of speed up this part of the video because I know my last part was like an hour. So I will do my best. Bear with me. I promise you this will make you think. I promise you I will bring up points that you've never heard before. I promise you that some of this might shock you. So I hope you enjoy. So let's delve into this real quick. Alright, so as we all know, Eurus broke out of Sherlolly and incorporated herself into Sherlock and John's lives to see how they interact with people. Her whole purpose was emotional context. And as I told you before, Sherlock's emotional context is his love for Molly. Eurus searches for emotional context in that regard by pretending to be E on the bus to figure out how much of a best friend John is to Sherlock, from pretending to be John's therapist, from pretending to be Faith Smith to get to know Sherlock in their adult age. She's very good at the art of disguise. She's very good at collecting information that people don't even know she collected. She's very good at knowing things that she shouldn't know because of how genius she is, as Mycroft said. However, on screen, the only time she meets Molly, the only time she could have known about Sherlock's love for Molly on screen, we don't know what happened off screen, so I can't really speak to that. I can't really speak to Moriarty's interactions with Molly off screen because I honestly don't have any idea. But the only time she meets Molly on screen is when Molly shows up to John's fake therapist's office with the ambulance to give Sherlock a checkup because he's clearly high. Eurus, pretending to be the therapist, is clearly present when Molly shows up. And I don't doubt that her being a genius, she's watching and listening to everything, taking everything in to incorporate into her game in Sherlolly. Because she could basically do whatever she wanted with it. Jim is already dead. He can't tell her what to do. Not that anyone would anyway, because she's sort of terrifying in that regard. But she's present there when Molly shows up. She's taking everything in. She hears the conversation between John and Sherlock and how John says, I need the one person who, unlike me, learned to see through your bullshit long ago. And as we know, Sherlock replies with, oh, well, who's that then? I'm sure I would have noticed. And then John says, oh, the last person you'd think of. Which, again, John's ignorance never ceases to shock me in Molly's regard. Especially now. Especially because Molly is his daughter's godmother. And Sherlock is his daughter's godfather. So the fact that he still doesn't get it, that he's not getting this, that he's not seeing the interactions between these two, even the interaction at Rosie's baptism was like an old married couple. The fact that he is so ignorant to this at this point not only astounds me in an annoyed sort of way, but it also sort of amuses me, because it just goes to the point that Sherlock makes early in the series when he says, oh, John, you see but you do not observe. He really doesn't. He really has no idea. But anyways, John says, "Oh, the last person you'd think of." To which we know the doorbell rings and we see Molly waiting there with the ambulance. This is a powerful scene because it tells us point blank that no, Sherlock is not the man who looks over Molly anymore. He hasn't been for years now. He did think of her. He does know that she's that person. He does know that she's the one he can count on to save him. He does know that she's the person that he can count on to go through detox with. Because let's be honest, John has a child now. He's not gonna take care of Sherlock for weeks on end, puking and shaking, and it's not just gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It's gonna be Molly, who detoxes him, like I believe she did the last time. Anyway, but Eurus, being the genius beyond Newton that she is, sees this interaction and sees the glaring emotional context there, which is not only does Sherlock think of Molly, but he thinks of her 2 weeks in advance for this. 2 weeks in advance. To which he teases John about this, going, "Oh, if you ever want to know how I predict the future," and John just kind of gets pissed, but I think that's kind of funny. But he thinks of her 2 weeks in advance to help him out with this. She's in no way, shape, or form the last person he'd think of. In fact, he's the first person he thought of, because he took into account that John would probably be so pissed at him for Mary's death that he wouldn't help him, which is why he ended up calling Molly anyways, knowing that Molly's the only person that helps him detox. But Sherlock knows that Molly's the only one who can handle him when he's high. He knows that he can count on her to show up, regardless of how annoyed she is at him at the moment, due to things that happen on screen or off screen that we see. But Eurus is there for this whole interaction, and there's also no doubt that she heard the little joke between Sherlock and Molly at the door when he's about to go into the ambulance. When he looks at her and he kind of smirks at her and he goes, "Oh, tell me when to cough." And she's just like really? If you're not familiar with that punchline, I suggest you Google it, because it is a sexual joke. All you would need to Google is, "Why do doctors tell men to cough during an exam?" And you will know the punchline to this joke. But anyways, it's a sexual joke. Which, in his high state, in his drugged up state, Sherlock makes this joke to Molly in sort of a backward sort of way, insinuating that he's into her romantically, or just teasing her about what had happened previously between them after the Reichenbach fall. But anyways, as I said, Eurus is there for this little display of ego as well, and no doubt sees the underlying tension and frustration there. In Mycroft's own words, again, she knew things she should never have known, as if she were beyond the human scope. So of course Eurus saw the undertones of love that Sherlock was easily giving off since he was high, and the attention and worry that Molly had for Sherlock, and the undertones of love that she was giving off. Just showing up to care for him, dropping what she was doing in her own life to come and, again, basically save him from himself. Of course, what Eurus does not see, that we see as the audience, is the noticeable change in Molly's appearance after the ambulance ride. Wink, wink, if you know what I'm getting at. That was pretty dramatic, and I do believe Moffat and Gaddis, or at least Gaddis, because Gaddis is a Sherlolly shipper, if you didn't know, and Moffat is an Adlock shipper. But at least something Gaddis threw in there to sort of tease the fans with, or at least the Sherlolly fans. Molly's cardigan is off. Her shirt is a little bit unbuttoned. Her hair is different. She's a little disheveled after the ambulance ride. Which I think they threw in there just to tease us, but, you know. But we didn't really need to know that they have something special. That was just for the audience, and everything like that. Another part of that scene that is easily skipped over because it's a split second little scene in passing before the dialogue, when John shows up to Culverton Smith's hospital, where the ambulance took Sherlock. We see Molly waiting near the ambulance. We see her sitting down looking distraught, and she's holding a piece of paper in her hand. And for those of you who didn't get it, or who don't know what that piece of paper is, I mean, it's not proven on screen, but going by what happens in the series and stuff, I believe it to be the list that Sherlock keeps for Mycroft. Again, that scene is one that we see in The Abominable Bride, when Sherlock comes to in the plane, how Mycroft tells John, oh, we have a pact every time he goes on the drugs. It's his responsibility to write out a list of everything he's taken for me, so that, if anything bad happens, I'll know what he's taken, and basically he can give it to the doctors so they can give him the right medicine for detox. But I believe that was the paper Molly was holding and reading in that split-second scene when she sat there at the back of the ambulance looking super distraught, reading over that little piece of paper before putting it in her pocket, because she knows that when he's on the drugs it's bad, but I don't think she's ever gotten a list from him like that. And we see this with her reaction to that when the dialogue actually starts back up when John gets there. We get another jab of something going on between them when Sherlock takes time to worry about Molly, and genuinely care. Even though he is high, he does try to act sarcastic about it, but he does care about her. He says, I'm worried about you, Molly. You look stressed. And I don't think he's trying to be too sarcastic. He's trying to play it off as sarcastic, even though I think he's actually concerned. And I think this is foreshadowing also to the I love you scene, because Molly picks up and she goes, I'm not having a good day. So I think this is Sherlock in his high state, sort of coming in tune to, something's going on with Molly that isn't quite right. And I'm worried about her. Something that he wouldn't have gotten when he wasn't high. And something I don't think he remembers after he detoxes. Because we don't know why she was having a good day. There's a bunch of theories, but none of us will ever know why she was having a bad day. But I think this was the start of Molly's sort of Molly having a hard time in her life, and everything like that Sherlock isn't going to remember after he detoxes. But we see him worry about Molly by saying that she looks stressed. So she replies, well, I'm stressed, you're dying. And he teases her more, and he says, he says, dying can only ruin one day of your life. Stress can ruin them all. I'm ahead then, and she's a little annoyed by this. She's distraught by this. She obviously doesn't want him to die. And she's going to help him detox, as I mentioned before. I'm ahead. Stress can ruin every day of your life. Dying can only ruin one. And that was kind of like a little old married couple banter that we kind of saw as well at Rosie's baptism, even though he was not high then. And then we see Smith come out and greet Sherlock, and Sherlock immediately just stands in front of Molly, blocking her from Smith's view, which is another reason why I think he keeps her. Another example of him keeping her at arm's length from criminals. Another example of why he never openly shows that he loves her. Because again, here's another criminal, and Molly is there, which means she could be susceptible to him, but Sherlock immediately blocks her from his view. We see Sherlock being led into the building, and he looks back at Molly, and he gives her this knowing kind of look with a glint in his eye, and it sort of just insinuates, like, please understand, I'm high, but I do actually care about you, and I know there's something going on, sort of look, as we see before he goes into the building. Another, going back, because, I'm sorry, my mind is a little frazzled right now. My aunt's making a lot of noise, and it's distracting. So it's hard for me to think, but anyways, going back to my point of Molly having the list of everything he took, and my opinion of that she never saw a list like this before, even though she has been through detox with him before, comes when she yells at him when John comes, and he goes, well, and she goes, I've seen healthier people on the slab. And Sherlock tries to joke, like, oh yeah, but to be honest, usually the people on your slab are younger, or whatever, and she goes, it's not funny, and he goes, oh, it's a little funny, because he's joking around, he's high, that's what he does when he's high, but I think when Sherlock's high, it also makes him more emotionally open. It definitely makes him more emotionally open, and we definitely see how deep he cares for Molly here, because he's high, but she looked over the list, and she reprimands him. Again, Molly's a tough cookie. She's not going to let him get away with shit. She's just not, without at least some sort of harsh words from herself to try to get him to correct his behavior. So what does she do after she sees this list? What does she do after Sherlock tries to downplay the fact that he is actually dying? She calls him out on it. She says, if you keep taking what you're taking at the rate you're taking it, you have weeks. And she looks both pissed and completely destroyed over that fact. And, Sherlock goes, oh, well, I have weeks then, why worry about it now? Which just makes her more upset. Which leads into the, you look stressed, Molly. And she's like, I'm stressed, you're dying. And into that little banter that I already said. Again, I'm sorry. My mind is a little distracted by all the noise from my kitchen right now. I wish she would be quieter, but, some things I can't help. Anyways, coming back to after Sherlock gives her the look and goes into the building with Smith. And that kind of ends their conversation that we see on screen until the I love you scene, because we don't see Molly after yelling at him about the drugs in The Lying Detective. We don't see her at all, actually, after that, until the I love you scene. And I think that's another reason why she's kind of pissed at him in the I love you scene when she first answers the phone. I think, this is my opinion, but maybe I'm digging too deep here, but there's always a sort of going back to the look that he shares after before he goes into the building with Smith. I've seen a lot of shows, some rom-coms, some more dramatic shows, some fantasy shows, blah, 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 blah. And the common denominator is usually, there's a relationship of some sort. There's a guy and a girl. And there's always, 99% of the time, there's always a scene in the show where there's a guy and there's a girl, and one of them is praying for the other to turn around when they leave. Because it's a sort of expression of, yeah, I do like you, yeah, I do love you, you're such a silly, impossible person, but I still want to see your face one last time before I leave the room. And I think this is what they did with Sherlock turning back around and looking at her with that little expression before he leaves with Culverton Smith, especially after he had shielded her from his view, in his own mind, protecting her from him. And I think that's what they were doing, was, again, with the audience, fooling with the audience with detail, just like they did with Molly's clothing and Molly's hair. I think that was just them toying with us, like, how can you not tell they're in love? Like, we're giving you all these hints, like, here, have a longing glance before he goes off with this criminal, and that just kind of made me happy, because even though he's high, as I said, he's more emotionally susceptible when he's high, especially in regard to Molly. Now, I started to say this before, and then I realized I forgot to say that, so I went back. I'm sorry. I'm trying. So, coming back to having a bad day and being snappy at Sherlock at the beginning of the phone call. As I said, in my last video, goes to show how she has her own life and her own issues separate from Sherlock, which is great that they openly share this with us. However, I do think that snappiness also extends from after the lying detective, because, again, we don't see her again on screen, but by going by what could have happened off screen, or what I believe to have happened off screen, again, I think that snappiness extends to, like, okay, I helped you completely detox again for weeks. I dealt with your puking. I dealt with your shaking. I dealt with your crappy sarcasm. I dealt with you being emotional with me. I dealt with you staying at my home again for days or for weeks or however long it was that he detoxed, which I'm assuming weeks, because Molly pointed out how bad it was this time. And it extends from, we also shared something in the past, and you're acting like we may have something again, but you're being so damn cocky about it, and so damn, like, Sherlocky about it, and skirting around it, and so much so that when you're no longer high, when you're okay again, when you're detoxed again, after I've helped you again, you haven't spoken to me since then. And, I cleared you, I helped you detox, I literally nursed you back to health again. And I think that's where a lot of Molly's annoyance at him comes from at the beginning of the I love you scene. I think that's why she doesn't pick up the phone the first time he calls, because she's annoyed at him for avoiding her for weeks after she helped him detox. I don't think he did it in a sort of harsh way, because, as we know, he's more human now. I think Sherlock realized how emotional and how human and how caring he was to her when he was high, when he was detoxing, off screen, obviously. I do think he probably said things or did things, or they shared moments, not physical, just or even if he hugged her, or if Molly held him while he was, like, vomiting or something, that could be physical, but not, like, in a romantic way. But I think it stemmed from him just not exactly knowing what to do with that information. Even though he had been through it before with her detoxing him. I think it was different this time because he is becoming more human. He is becoming more emotional. He is becoming more in touch with his feelings, and especially his feelings for Molly. And I think that he was having a hard time with that. And I think that off screen, that may have been something Eurus saw, because we know she was in London. We know she was incorporating herself into their lives. And being how smart she is, I have no doubt that she has inside info on what happened when he was detoxing. I think, to go to that point that I just realized, we don't know how long those cameras have been in Molly's house that were trained on her in the I Love You scene. We have no idea how long the cameras were in her house. If you want to believe, as I do, that they were in her house when Sherlock was detoxing, that gives us a whole lot more insight as to what Eurus knew, as to why she made this game for Molly, as to the fact that she knew without a shadow of a doubt that he was in love with her. And again, Molly and Sherlock didn't know the cameras were there at that point. So I think that goes to Eurus's case of this is why she did what she did. And this goes to what she saw off screen that helped her with this game that we don't see as the audience, unfortunately. I was a little bit pissed off at the lack of Molly's airtime in season 4. But on the same token, the amount of leeway that we get to theorize about in this way goes with her lack of airtime. So I'm both pissed off at it and a little bit pleased at it. But I think it goes without saying that those cameras were there when Molly was detoxing Sherlock, because we know John wasn't, because he has Rosie. We know that John was still pissed at him for Mary's death, and he didn't want Sherlock around Rosie. So we know that Sherlock probably stayed with Molly. Again, Molly helped him detox. And then Eurus was filming that. Eurus was studying the emotional context between them during that intimate sort of experience that they went through. And she used that. She used it, and she went through that footage probably with a fine-tooth comb, even though she's genius and she probably didn't need to. But in my opinion, she definitely took that footage, and she definitely used that for her game, and she definitely knew without a shadow of a doubt that Sherlock was in love with Molly, because she already knew vice versa. Molly's kind of an open book. We already knew she loved Sherlock. Anyone could see that, obviously. But that's that, basically, off screen. And that I think is why I'm sorry, she interrupted me again. She is such a John. I can't even handle it. But anyways, as I was saying, I think Molly's snarkiness stems from Sherlock leaving once he was completely detoxed and clean again, and due to his emotional prowess, or his emotional outbursts of what happened when he was detoxing. I think he doesn't quite know how to talk about this head on with Molly. I don't think he knows how to deal with it. And what some people do when they don't quite know how to confront somebody about something difficult is they just ignore it. And I think that's just what Sherlock was doing. I think he detoxed, and I think he just was avoiding her because he didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to express himself. And as I said before, he couldn't just tell her that he loved her because he wants her at arm's length. He wants her safe from criminals because it works for him up to now. So that is why Molly is so pissed at him And that is why Molly doesn't answer the phone on the first ring when he calls. Because not only is she having a bad day, but she sees that he's calling, and her first thought goes to, this bastard spent weeks with me detoxing. This bastard needed my help so much detoxing. I helped him again to detox. I helped him get clean again. I went through his emotional outbursts. I went through him needing me. I went through everything that goes with detox with him. And he leaves and he avoids me, and he doesn't speak to me since. Like hell, I'm gonna answer this bastard's phone call on the first ring because I'm done with his bullshit. And I'm not gonna take that. So I think that's what that stemmed from. Her not answering, her looking at the phone with like a what the hell, why the hell is he calling now, of all days when I'm having a shitty day, sort of look in her eyes. And to me, that's basically what happened, is he didn't know what to say to her after everything transpired with detox. And in my opinion, Eurus absolutely filmed that and absolutely used that to her advantage, which nobody knew at that point, obviously, until the I love you scene. And that's, that's why she was so snippy. And she was having a terrible day, as I said. She was already having a terrible day with her own issues that had nothing to do with Sherlock. I think that just added to it. I think that's just why she was in a bad mood. Everything combined. And for him to call on that specific day, she was just already done. She just already didn't want to hear it. As we hear when she answers, she goes, "Hello, Sherlock. Is this urgent? Because I'm not having a good day." And then she proceeds to say, "Well, what is it? Just tell me. Like, what? Get on with it." And then, of course, he says, "Just say these words for me. I love you." And she goes, "You bastard." And she's just generally in a bad mood that day. And it wasn't really the day for that to happen. And that just speaks to what she was going through in her own life. And not only for him to just call her after not speaking to her in person since detox, but to demand her to say that she loves him, to demand her to open his heart to him over the phone after everything they've been through, on one of the worst days of her life that we've seen, is just too much for her. And that's why she snaps back in pure Molly style, the way she always does. That's why she snaps back. And she goes, and she's just thinking to herself, like, no freaking way, dude. Not this time. Nuh-uh. If you want me to say this, you're gonna say it first. And she goes, you say it first. Go on. You say it. Say it like you mean it. And to which Sherlock is obviously a bit shocked by this, even though he shouldn't be. And I think Eurus was counting on her to snap back as well, which was pretty great. I loved that she snapped back, because it's so true to her character development that they made her tell him to say it first. I think it was just amazing that they made her do that, because that's part of her character development. That's what we see. She never takes his BS without a rebuttal. But we, I think we know, basically, I know I say it's my theory, but I think we know that, everything that transpired between her and Sherlock with the detox, I think we know that Eurus used that to her advantage. I think we know that that's why Molly was pissed. John mentions, Molly looking after him. And I think this is what the audience doesn't realize. So the I love you scene isn't just the I love you scene at face value. The I love you scene is basically two scenes. It's what we see at face value, and it's what we don't see at face value. It's the emotional context that Eurus is using. And that's not what we see at face value. That's what Eurus sees, but that's not what us as the audience sees, which is why we were a bit taken aback when the genius who kills people has an agenda of emotional context. I think that's why a lot of people were confused about this, because it's not what we see at face value. It's you have to live the scene as if you're Eurus, as if you're what she's seeing, as if you are living what she has seen, both on screen and off screen, between Sherlock and Molly. And I think it's basically her scene. It's not what we are seeing as the audience. It's what Eurus is seeing, and people don't understand that. What we see at face value, what Sherlock sees, what Molly sees, what Eurus, the genius beyond Newton, sees, which is the emotional context, which was the tension between Sherlock and Molly off screen, how they've communicated, even very recently before this game of Eurus's. This is the version of the scene that we can only imagine, and that Mycroft and John are so ignorant of, because Mycroft and John have never seen Sherlock and Molly's intimate moments, even the way we have as the audience has seen. They didn't see, Sherlock and Molly's "You look sad when you think I can't see you" scene. They didn't see Sherlock and Molly's "What do you need you" scene. They didn't see Sherlock and Molly's "The one person who mattered the most" scene. They didn't see Sherlock's "I hope you'll be happy" Molly Hooper scene. They didn't see any of those. They weren't getting the hints that we were getting about Sherlock's love for Molly. Or even the hints that Eurus got while filming them while they were detoxing. While Sherlock was detoxing. So that's why Mycroft and John are spectacularly ignorant to this. That's why they are so in shock. That's why they kind of don't really give a second thought to this being, oh, it's poor little Molly, Sherlock's being harsh to her again. No, that wasn't the purpose of this. That wasn't the point. That wasn't the point. And Eurus basically says this. She basically lets her guard down and tells them, in a roundabout way, because she's a genius. She won't tell them point blank, but she'll tell them in her own words what she means, and about this scene. I'm going to read off my notes now because it gets a little more confusing. But using everything that I've said in this video so far, it absolutely had to fester into the scene where they profess their very real and tangible love for each other, regardless of the non-emotional context, which was Eurus's deadly game for attention, which was the context that Mycroft and John are focusing on, which, as we know, isn't what they should be focusing on. But what we do know, and stay with me here, what we do know is that Eurus does want Sherlock happy. We know that she knows it was about Sherlock saying "I love you" to Molly, and not Molly saying "I love you" to Sherlock, because she's so genius in that way. We don't know exactly why Eurus has taken a fondness to Molly, because this scene was about a fondness to Molly. This scene was about Molly, Eurus giving Molly what she wants. And not only just because she can use her brother in that way, but because she has some sort of fondness for Molly, which I will describe in a little bit. We don't know why she does it in this roundabout way. I think that just goes to her being a genius and her not being in tune to her own emotions. But we do know that she wants Molly and Sherlock to have a happy ending, despite forcing Sherlock to reveal his heart in this cruel way. I think that maybe she thinks it's because Sherlock is ignoring Molly, because he's in his comfort zone with John, almost the same way that he ignored her with Victor, because Sherlock kind of focuses on his friendships, and he tries to repress his emotions to refine his reasoning, as she said. But delving into the whole Eurus Molly fondness slash mirror slash the reason why I think this was on a deeper level for Eurus is because of this. So, if you'll remember, at the end of the episode, Eurus says, she says, I wanted to play too, or I never had a best friend, and then she says, I had no one. But we know that she loves her brother. We know that she thinks he's intriguing. We know that she wanted to spend time with him. We know that Sherlock is Eurus's only pressure point by the way she reacts when, instead of killing John or Mycroft, he elects to kill himself, and she doesn't allow him to. And she actually gets pretty emotional there when she says, stop that at once, he's the only person she cares about. He's the whole reason she did this entire game in the first place. So Sherlock is her only pressure point. And she tells him, I had no one. All I wanted was, your affection. All I wanted was your attention. All I wanted was a relationship with my brother who could sort of understand me. In an emotional way, not even in a clever way, but in an emotional way, which is why he was her favorite. And that brings me to the mirrored scene from none other than A Scandal in Belgravia after the dreaded Christmas party, where Sherlock asks Molly to come to the morgue to lay out the body. And he's kind of softer to her. He says, in a sort of kind, softer way, he goes, you didn't need to come in, Molly, because it's Christmas. In his mind, Christmas is an ordinary holiday that people enjoy, that they want to spend at home with their family, that they want to, not be at work for. And Molly replies with, it's okay, everyone else was busy with, Christmas. Molly has no one. She doesn't have close family. She basically just wanted to spend time with Sherlock. That's why she went to the morgue. Because she loves him, because she finds him intriguing, because she cares about him just like Eurus. Because just like Eurus, she has no one. Not even family. Eurus had no one. She didn't even have her family because they thought she was dead, and Sherlock didn't remember her. And Mycroft is the type of person that didn't really care. He didn't care about her. He just knew that she was crazy. He just wanted to lock her up for being psychotic. And I think these mirrors are further proven when you think back and listen to Sherlock's description of Molly when he's deducing the coffin, and he says, unmarried, practical about death, alone. That describes Molly, but it also describes Eurus to a T. Death doesn't scare her or shock her. Eurus is never going to get married because she's psychotic. But Molly didn't get married because she didn't love Tom. And alone, Eurus has been alone her entire life. She's been in solitary confinement since the age of 5. And that really screws up a person. That really messes up a person, especially a person who's already prone to psychotic fits, the way she was as a child. That messes her up. And I think in a way, in a sort of twisted sort of way, because she's already psychotic, we know, and she's already a genius, like we know. But in a way, that's how she connects to Molly. That's why I think she has a special fondness for her. That's why I think she decided on this sort of game. Because, as we know, she had no intention on hurting Molly. Even though Sherlock believed that she did. She had no intention of hurting Molly. She just wants, in a way, she wants Molly to have her happy ending with her brother, with Sherlock. This is why she doesn't kill her. This is why, after the phone call ends, her face looks so sad and a little bit annoyed at Sherlock when he again tries to brush it off and repress his feelings for Molly, and does that whole spiel of, Eurus, I won, I saved Molly Hooper. And Eurus says, do be sensible. There were no explosions there was no explosives in our little house. It's an important line. And this line is even more important when she says, why would I be so clumsy? Why would she hurt Molly? She's getting revenge partially for Molly, I believe, because she relates to her on that level, because she relates to her loneliness, because she relates to her wanting closeness with Sherlock. And she's exposing Sherlock as an emotional being, which to him is the worst possible threat to himself anyone could make. This is why he's so enraged. This is why he's so distraught, because even he isn't as smart as Eurus. So he does believe that she did it to make him hurt Molly, but no, that wasn't the point. She didn't do it to make him hurt Molly. It absolutely wasn't to make him hurt Molly. It was to help Molly basically win him over. It was to help Sherlock see that it's not healthy to love her just at a distance. And it's her basically exposing that and cracking him open, and obviously we know he responds to that in a sort of violent and absolutely destroyed way, in smashing the coffin and everything. But Eurus then goes on to say, you didn't win, you lost. Look what you did to her. Look what you did to yourself. All those complicated little emotions I lost count. Emotional context, Sherlock, it destroys you every time. A lot of the audience, like us, the viewers, takes this at face value. I don't take a lot at face value, clearly, because by these little videos, I don't take things at face value. Eurus is pointing out that he didn't win by saving her, and just by making her say it to him. He lost by pretending not to reciprocate. At first, we see that the second I love you is completely genuine. I think that was just him letting it slip in his distraught emotional state. That was him letting it slip. But he lost by pretending not to completely reciprocate, which is why Eurus is annoyed at his response at the end when he says, I won, I saved Molly Hooper. And why she looks completely like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, I gave you the perfect opportunity. And he just represses it again, which kind of annoys her. Because he does reciprocate, he does love her, and he is going to need to fix things and explain this to her. And he is going to need to confront her. In a way that he did not want to confront her after detoxing. He is going to have that conversation with her, which Eurus forced him into because she knows that he's been avoiding her. And she wants him to make things right with Molly. She wants him to be truthful with Molly. She wants him to end up with Molly. She tells him that she sees all his complicated little emotions for her. Loving her but needing her at arm's length. Desiring her but he can't because he wants to keep her safe. All his emotions for Molly are absolutely complicated because in his mind, he wants what he can't have. In his mind, he can't have her because he'll hurt her. In his mind, if he admits to loving Molly, ultimately she will end up like Mary. Ultimately, his love will destroy her in a physical way, not just an emotional way. She will end up dead or hurt because of him. Hence, drumroll please, the meaning of the coffin. In Sherlock's mind, if he admits to loving Molly, she will end up dead like Mary, which is why Eurus put the coffin in the room. The whole point of it was the whole point of Eurus's game. It's a mind-twisting power play on Sherlock's own beliefs that if he loves Molly fully and completely and physically, and he admits all of this to her, if he gives himself emotionally over to her, that she will end up either extremely hurt or dead, the way that Mary did, because we know how he thinks of himself in regard to what happened to Mary, and this is why he doesn't want to let himself get too close to Molly, and I think that was the whole significance of the coffin. I don't think it was actually a threat. It was not an actual threat to Molly. It was a play on Sherlock's own beliefs that Eurus was trying to exploit, because again, she's a genius. But Eurus, being brilliant, knows this, so she says that. She says, emotional context, Sherlock, it destroys you every time. Instead of just loving her and not thinking so much, not being so inside your head, by not letting your head get in the way of your emotions, by letting your own emotional context of believing that loving her will get her hurt or killed, it destroys you. That fear of hurting Molly destroys you, and it destroys you by keeping you apart. I mean, it destroyed your heart by believing that so fully, especially after Mary, that you've just avoided Molly, and off screen, since your detox, you've avoided her, and you keeping her that far away, you keep being detached from her, that's the emotional context. That's what's destroying you. And because again, he believes that being that close to Molly will get her hurt or killed, and we see this with the coffin. But that's what this scene is. It's not face value. Sherlock is never face value, especially when we have Eurus, the genius beyond Newton, in the mix. And that's why all this foreshadowing led up to the I love you scene, because it's not just a scene, though. It's a mirror to Sherlock's heart and Sherlock's head, and it's a window into seeing how Eurus, and her only pressure point being Sherlock, wants him to be so distraught that he forgets his fear of her life and he gives himself over to Molly. And this is why he smashes the coffin. He's so distraught, and he's so fearful that being close to her will get her killed the way that it got Mary killed, and he can't allow himself to think of her in that coffin because of him, and this is why he smashes it. But Eurus wants him to go to her, to love her, to be the one to protect her from his own fear, unlike he could for Mary. It's all about insight. It's all about reading people. It's all about reading the situation. It's all about putting the foreshadowing together like an intricate puzzle. And that's what it was about. It wasn't about the face value.